Good day, everyone. I am Jesus Anton. I'm head of unit in the Trade and Agricultural Directorate of the OECD, and I'm chairing this webinar today. Please be aware that this webinar is being recorded. The objective of this webinar is presenting the recent OECD report policies on the future of farming and food in the European Union, and having a first exchange of ideas with experts and participants on the OECD recommendations. The report is the result of a very fruitful cooperation that we have had between the OECD and the European Commission, in particular DG Agri. And today's communication is part of a broader engagement to discuss with the Commission, with the stakeholders, and all this will follow. Be aware that instead of the chat function that we normally have in Zoom, we have here the Q&A function available, where you will be able to type your questions at any moment during the webinar. And these questions will be grouped up and posted to the speaker at the end of the webinar. We'll do our best to tackle as much questions as possible, given the limited time that we have available. The speakers will keep their camera on when they are speaking, and we will have the webinar starting by two speakers. First, Catherine Geslin-Lanel, Director of Strategy, Policy and Analysis in the European Commission, DG Agri. And then Francesco Bani, Agricultural Policy Analyst in the Trade and Agricultural Directorate of the OECD. Then we will ask two experts to highlight the key findings and of the report and pose some questions. And those will be Alan Matthews, Professor at Trinity College Dublin, and Gianluca Brunori, Professor in the University of Pisa. And finally, we'll have a session as a part of the seminar with Q&A time that will be managed by my colleague, Adriana Garcia Vargas, Agricultural Policy Analyst in the Trade and Agricultural Directorate of the OECD. With no more preamble, let me give the floor to Catherine Geslin-Lanel from the Commission that will make her opening remarks. Catherine, you have the floor.
Many thanks, Jesus. Good morning to everybody, and thank you very much for joining this webinar. Thank you to OECD for organizing this webinar. It's very much welcome. Of course, the report is very much welcome, but let me also say that I would like to thank the OECD Secretariat for the hard work that they have made over the last, I think it was more than a year and a half even, I could say. I was only involved at the final stage, so the last 6 months, but I realized how much work this has been to gather the evidence, to engage both with us in the Commission, DG Agri, you mentioned, but I should also refer to my colleagues from DG Climat, DG Environment, DG Santé, as well as to our EU member states, and last but not least, of course, members of the OECD also. We've been involved in this review process. So without, of course, underestimating the final outcome, which is the report, it is important to say that we value very much also the process itself as a way to engage internally in the EU, outside the EU, with OECD members, with you, the Secretariat, on this important policy. You've made a review of the previous CAP. It's important to remind ourselves. So not the CAP we are currently implementing since the 1st of January, but still it remains extremely timely and important to have that review in the process of considering already how the future CAP after 2028 will look like, because though we have had many changes in the new CAP, there are commonalities and points on which we can reflect. And of course, here I will just mention, I will not go into the details because you're going to make a full, a thorough presentation, but it's clear that when it comes to, how do we provide income support? How do we use conditionality? How do we target our support? How do we also make sure that we work with this policy in such a way that we encourage our farmers to deliver more sustainable farming system and farming practices, these questions remain fully relevant both for this new CAP as well as for the future one. There has been also some lessons that we need to learn, and I'm saying that, of course, in a very constructive manner. In terms of the methodology for the review, I think it's important. And if there is opportunity, I'll be happy during the webinar or later on also to share with you some of the learnings that we've had from the review policy when it comes to how we can make a better use of, benchmarking. So using these reports and this process to benchmark with others. How do we manage the evidence base and how do we collect the evidence? How do we also work on the methodology for the producer support estimates, in particular to make sure that we are also fully reflecting, all the three pillars of the sustainability. So there are some lessons here that we will be further working with you, the Secretariat, but also with the members of the OECD, so as to make the future process even more effective. Let me say that we will make full use of this report, this review, in considering the future of the common agricultural policy. I am not saying that we will follow up with every recommendation, obviously, for many reasons. Some of them we are not necessarily fully supporting them, and more importantly, it's important to say that obviously the European policy-making process is a complex one, and we are not the only one. When I say we, the Commission, to make the final decision, we need to work, and rightly so, with our member states, with the European Parliament, with the Council. So that's something which is important. And let me say that many of the recommendations that you've made will also be important in a context where obviously we need to see how this policy can help us to foster the sustainability of our farming system. And I would even add that this will help us also in our reflection when considering a possible future enlargement of the European Union, which is going to be a great challenge, but we are confident that the common agricultural policy will be able to help us to tackle that challenge. So happy to further engage with all of you today, obviously, but also later on in the context of this reflection on how we can make our policies, not just the CAP, but also other agricultural policy, more effective in delivering better life to our citizens.
Thank you very much, Catherine, for this warm introduction and putting into context the work that we have engaged between the OECD and the Commission, and looking ahead as well and how it's going to be influenced the next steps. Let me now pass the floor to our main speaker. This is going to be Francesco Bani from the OECD. Francesco, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Jesus, and thank you, Catherine, for the introduction, for the nice introduction and background of this report. And I will do my best in 15-20 minutes to summarize the key findings of this report, which is, as Catherine said, is a result of really almost 2 years of joint efforts with the DG Agri. And let me start with by thanking, first of all, my colleagues, because of course I'm presenting the key finding, but this has been really teamwork with many colleagues from the OECD, and also with some colleagues of DG Agri, in particular Mark Ropper and Olaf Heidelbeck, that really had a nice collaboration over the last 2 years. I will start basically give you some background information on what you think, what is the OECD review of EU policies about, starting from the ministerial that the OECD hosted last year with more than 50 ministers and vice ministers. which actually joined a declaration on transformative solutions for sustainable agriculture and food systems. And this declaration, they really highlighted the importance of OECD at the international level in supporting evidence-based policymaking, highlighting the need for productive, resilient, and sustainable agricultural food systems. And starting from this, we do have in-house a framework, the PSC framework, Productive Sustainability Resilient Framework, which we apply to all the country reviews, including this one, which is not a proper country review, since we try to assess the EU agricultural policies entirely. And we try to look at the whole set of government incentives in terms of policy, regulation, and so on, how these policies affect the drivers of the agricultural sector, in particular structural change, innovation, and natural resources, and how these drivers may bring to desired outcome of the objectives, focusing on these three important aspects of the evolution of the farming sector: productivity, sustainability, and resilience. This is some of the examples of the country reviews. The last one is the one on the European Union, but this year, earlier this year, we also published the review of Spain and the Netherlands, and in previous year we had many reviews. What is this actually make this review of the European Union sort of different and to some extent rather challenging is also the timing of this review. So we try as a main research and analytical objectives of this report to understand whether there is a space for a new role for EU agricultural policy in a really evolving context. In particular, we drafted this review in the context of the last year, when there was the last year of the previous programming period, but where the legislative proposal of the new CAP were launched in 2018, as you know, but 1 year later, there was the announcement of the Green Deal, and actually there was a requirement for these policies to be actually to deliver on the Green Deal objectives after the proposals. And then the approval of the Commission of the CAP was actually in between two important aspects that we need to highlight. I mean, the COVID-19 2020 and the Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022. So in really complex policy environment, we asked the CAP to deliver on also on Green Deal objectives. So there are so many contrasting and difficult objectives to be combined. But as Catherine said in the introduction, we didn't want really to assess mainly the policy interventions until 2022. But to some extent, we also try to explore a little bit the potential of the current CAP, because we know there is a lot of ambition of this new CAP to be really a tool for a more performance-based policy through a new delivery model, which gives more responsibility to member states. So we also try to explore and to try to see whether this is going in the right direction and whether this can bring to a more forward-looking and bolder policies in the post-27. So in one slide, I've tried to actually re-summarize the key issues, the key aspect of the storylines of this report. So again, the agri-food sector and the CAP are in a critical junction that we really to deliver on different level. And we also use the triple challenge of food system, sustainable livelihood, environmental sustainability, and income support. And in terms of assessment, we believe the assessment, the performance is mixed. Productivity keeps growing, but in terms of environmental sustainability, there are some improvements, but not in all aspects. And the CAP actually so far contributed to some positive improvements, but we saw there is a big gap, or at least a considerable gap between the ambition from environmental side and the results on the field. And we feel that the CAP needs really to fill these gaps also by supporting more activity innovation that can really bring to put together productivity and environmental sustainability results. So we try to help on this process. To see to what extent we can provide recommendations to help the policy in the future, the European agricultural policy in the future, and particularly the CAP, to put together productivity and sustainability. We bring 15 recommendations with also some detailed actions that we think the European Commission should take it on board, not only for the next programming period, but for some aspect also start to think about how it would be possible to act in the current programming period. So let me start with the assessment of performance. I will try to give you some details and data on what we assessed in terms of performance, but then I will maybe spend a little bit more time on the recommendations, because I think it's interesting for you to see what in synthesis we propose to the European Union to improve the policies. In terms of performance, I already anticipated a bit the story. Productivity is growing, but we use the total factor productivity as a main indicators, which allow us to see how it is possible to produce less with fewer inputs, which is really important from a point of view of sustainability. And as you can see in the left graph, the EU is performing, I mean, the productivity is growing, but to some extent, a less extent to other countries. And in particularly during the last decade, the growth has decreased slightly. Of course, the productivity growth in the past has been translated in improved agri-food export, performance, trade balance surplus. But since 2010, this trend has been changed a little bit. And in the review, you can find detailed data on that. We also analyze the difference among member states. And we can see that the older member states that joined the EU before 2000 were used to perform better before 2010, while during the last decades, new member states tend to perform better than old member states. And of course, TFP is an average of different productivities, and as you can see on the graph on the right, is an average of this productivity, and the results that we have achieved in European Union are mainly based on a reduction of labor, while the reduction of variable output were observed until 2010, but during the last decades we saw a slight increase of the use of variable output to achieve productivity growth. So this could be also an additional challenge for the sustainability objectives. As for the sustainability objectives, I must admit that it's really difficult to actually in a few minutes to give you an overview of the performance of the indicators. I'll just bring a couple of examples. Greenhouse gas emissions, the trend, as you can see on the spotted line showing the EU 27 average. And the EU was performing quite well. The greenhouse gas emissions were decreasing until 2010, 11, and then during the last decade, we observed an increase of greenhouse gas emission. At the same time, we try also to combine the trend of greenhouse gas emission with output growth. So we may say the output growth grew more than the growth of greenhouse gas emissions. So we may say that the EU achieved a partial decoupling between the growth of emission and the growth of output. On the right, you see the nitrogen balance. Here, the decrease is more evident. And in this case, EU reached a full decoupling. I mean, output growth was reached through a reduction in nitrogen balance. This is just an example. Of course, nutrient balance maybe seen as a main problem in some hotspots, in some area where the problem are still evident. And I'm not showing here the biodiversity indicators, which is an important one. According to the available indicators, also see that the performance is not very good. I mean, agrobiodiversity is declining quite impressively during the last decades. So just all to say that the results are really mixed. In terms of policy, we use here the OECD indicators, mainly the producer support estimate indicators. And as you can see in this graph, we show the evolution of these indicators as a percentage of the total farm gross receipt. These graphs show that there's been a strong reduction in producer support, notably market price support, mostly before 2000. And this is really positive. And it's also positive that the EU actually opted for a progressive decoupling of producer support until to the health check. Since 2010, data show that not many things have been changed, basically in terms of percentage of producer support estimate and the composition of the different types of payments according to OECD categorization. At the same time, we need to acknowledge that the OECD indicators, especially this figure, doesn't capture all the mechanism that behind the payments, and it's clear that since the midterm reform in 2005, there is the cost compliance. So an additional, an important share of payments are linked to input constraints, mandatory input constraints, and also environmental schemes are voluntary input constraints attached to payment. And there's been a really big evolution of this during the last 15 years. So it's really 2/3 of payments now are linked to input to voluntary, to environmental constraints, while before there was only a small percentage. So in the report, we try to acknowledge these efforts to further integrate environmental climate objective within the common agricultural policies. But nevertheless, we also acknowledge that there are still two main problems. First of all, the coupled their payments still make the bulk of the CAP spending, really concentrate the money there. And there's not really targeted to the income of farm households, not the environmental performance. And they may also have unintended consequences in preserving uncompetitive activities. They may hinder innovation as showing and declining, also being a sort of barrier to structural change and generational renewal. We explain quite in detail that in the report. So this is one of the main issues that we raise. The second issue is on the to the environmental cross compliance, since we believe and we feel that the effectiveness of this tool needs to be fully proved, and is a tool which is hard to monitor. And implementation of these tools attached to the first pillar, not only cross compliance, but also greening in the past, have been very flexible in the bad sense of the terms. Basically, usually we're biased to maintain the status quo and did have not really big change in terms of environmental performance. These are the two main issues that we need to be described when we describe the evolution of producer support estimate at the EU level. Using the same data from the OECD categorization on PSE, we see that the innovation is really not at the bulk in terms of financing. You can see almost the 90% of the producer support estimate go to the single farmers, and only 6.1% go to the knowledge innovation systems, which is slightly above to the OECD average, but behind countries like Australia or Canada. At the same time, we also acknowledge that the EU is doing well in terms of creating a really vital environment, international context where through Horizon Europe, for example, push a lot in terms of sustainability issues linked to agriculture, and also adopt a really promising and innovative way to put together all the stakeholders to the European Innovation Partnership for Agriculture. And operational groups and these new multi-actor participatory platform are really well promised. I think at this regard, the EU is really at the forefront in terms of process involvement of stakeholders in the innovation process. At the same time, I mean, the money spent to the innovation is still relatively low compared to the money that go to the agricultural sector. This was more or less what I wanted to say. See, the time is running quite quick, so I'm trying to, in the last 5 minutes, to give you at least an overview of the main recommendations that you can find in the report. Of course, it's very difficult to go into the details of all of them. We group them in 5 areas: payments, regulations, innovation, data strategies, environmental services. There are 15 main recommendations organized in 41 actions for the current and next programming periods. I will try to focus on the key messages here, maybe first of all on these slides. I think really give an overview of what are our key message. First of all, increase and target the budget to the stated priority: environmental sustainability and innovation. Increase the share of the budget to also information, training, advisory targeted, but also, and more important, link the payments to monitorable results and improve the targeting. This is one of the key messages of our review. So we need to accelerate the transition to target the income support to low-income farm households, since, as you know, the direct payments now are really calculated based on the area. It is not really clear the rationale how we can consider this as an income support. So we need to first to start a transition to really target to the income support if you want to keep this type of payments. We are aware that this is not easy and it takes time, so we propose a sort of plan to do that, invest first in filling the data and then maybe move toward. But we think also there is need to really introduce a clear separation from income support, environmental measures. The fact that these two objectives are mixed in the same pillar through instrument, I don't think we don't think this helped farmers to really understand which are the requirements they need to adopt the new practices that may improve environmental sustainability. So start to think to separate at least in two separate policy package, income support, environmental measures. And above all, we also in addition, we ask the European Union to ensure that the payments and policies do not create barriers to entry or hinder innovation. These slides, this is a figure that is not included in the report, is in the policy brief, which is another summary of the key findings of the report. I think is really summarized which are the main action that we think we need to do in order to reorient the CAP toward new functions and objectives. And according to three main lines. First of all, the CAP needs to overcome its past dependency and to move toward a bolder and more forward-looking food system policy, reoriented to innovation and sustainability. And to do that, the CAP may also use the push of the presence, so the new delivery model, and because this also we need to check whether the new delivery model really creates the incentive for member states to move to a more result-based approach and to address the implementation gaps we observed. So we have not assessed that, but we think it is important to see whether the CAP can use the push of the present. And prepare for the pool of the future. So this depends on how all the elements of the European Green Deal will progress in the future, including political priority and the new Commission and Parliament after the election and so on. We know this is a bigger debate on this, but I think it is going to be an important pool to reform the structure of payments, invest in data evaluation and reporting. I think my time is almost gone. Just will go quickly to these three aspects. Highlighted and to free from the weight of the past. I think we need to reorient support toward innovations for sustainability, finding greater synergies between policy area and really steering the innovation efforts to sustainability, improve the skills of farmers and to develop an important skills agenda, and strengthen the participation of farmers in the ACIs and strengthen the system of advisory services. So put the innovation at the center of the policies, need to also to invest specifically on specific aspect of the ACIS system to make sure that this is aligned with the environmental objectives of the new policy. And in terms of using the push of the present, how to address the implementation gap. We think that it's not only the CAP is important to achieve objectives, but also all the regulatory environment which is together with the CAP. I mean, if we think about the current discussion on the natural restoration law or the sustainable use of pesticide regulations, it's clear that it's important that also all the regulations are aligned together with incentives to achieve objectives. And we need that is a need to refocus a bit the scope of the cross-compliance, because it's not, I mean, in order to make sure that maybe reducing the number of GAIC, but make sure that the cross-compliance achieve results on the field. We feel that there is already good example in terms of collective measures, result-based payments that should be mainstreamed, and to make sure through experimentation to make sure that these important tools are upscaled. And we need also to introduce maybe an ex-ante assessment or reporting or results when farmers adopt payment for environmental services. Finally, the pool of the future. I think the first point of this slide basically I think synthesize well the key message of the report. Reform the structure of payments to target priorities and link them to monitorable results. To do that, we need to think a new way to support farming and also maybe to transform the current regulations to payments for environmental services that could be voluntary, oriented to results. But in order to do that, I think it's important to invest a lot on data and indicators. So we are aware that and we also acknowledge in the review that the European Commission is doing quite a lot of work on these. For example, with the transition from the FDN to FCN, the new performance monitoring framework and so on. But I think it's important to continue to improve the quality and availability of existing indicator, and especially to address the data gaps. There are many data gaps. I already quoted the issue of income support and the low-income household, but also other important data gaps in the agro-environmental indicators, on the social performing on farms, on immigration, on gender, and so on. So it is really important to fill these data gaps to really to adopt a new performance-based policy. And last point, but quite important, digital technologies may really help. So I think it's important that the European Union enhance digital technologies to better monitor policies, but also to strengthen the advisory services and to be sure that all the ACI system is aligned with the new goals and objectives that are increasingly integrated in the EU agricultural policies. Thank you very much for your attention, and sorry at some point I had to really to run very quick because there was lots of information that I want to share with you on this report. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Francesco, for so much food for thought. Let me pass immediately the floor to Alan Matthews that will give some insights and questions.
Thank you, Jesus. And can I say at the outset, I'm really very pleased to be invited to open this discussion on this important OECD report on policies for the future of food and farming in the EU. As Francesco has told us, the review includes 41 different recommendations grouped under 15 headings. And I'll focus my remarks on issues relating to the CAP payments, regulations, and environmental services. The review is clear on what the priority should be for future EU agricultural policy, and I quote, "Tackling the triple challenge food systems face is more difficult in the new policy context of growing environmental concerns and successive global crises. While recognizing potential trade-offs with other objectives, the urgency of the climate and environmental situation means that the transition of the EU agriculture and food systems cannot be delayed." A recurrent theme throughout the review is that the EU often has appropriate policies in place to address these issues, but that there's an implementation gap between policy ambition and implementation results. The review calls for targeting a larger share of the CAP budget to performance-oriented payments for environmental and climate objectives. It doesn't propose to go as far as the UK-England policy of eliminating all area-based decoupled payments, but it does suggest the possibility of withholding payments from farmers over the statutory retirement age to encourage generational renewal. It calls for allocating a larger share of the budget to innovation, training, and advice to farmers on sustainability and resilience objectives, while also phasing out the most distorting and potentially most environmentally harmful forms of support. Farmers are increasingly exposed to extreme events, sometimes by market crises, but increasingly by natural disasters. Its proposal here is to focus more on ex-ante tools to manage risks, such as better advisory services, rather than focusing on increasing revenue stability by compensating losses ex post. But faced with the scale of disasters, such as affected Greece or Slovenia or southern Spain this year, it seems clear more thought needs to be put into how catastrophic losses are financed, as the scale of the agricultural reserve is clearly inadequate. Commissioner Wojciechowski has spoken of creating a third crisis pillar of the CAP, and it will be interesting to see what he will propose. With the reduced role for decoupled payments, the review suggests reforming enhanced conditionality to focus on a reduced number of practices that can be monitored on a large scale through satellite images and digital tools, while increasing on-farm controls and penalties for non-compliance. Although the voluntary agri-environment schemes are seen as the poster boy for payments for ecosystem services, the review recognises that they've often not delivered on their potential. It makes a strong plea for moving away from individual to collective schemes, and also promoting more results-based schemes where farmers entering a scheme would have to undertake an ex-ante environmental assessment to provide a baseline against which progress can be measured. Despite its title being Policies for the Future of Farming and Food, there's almost nothing on food policies in the review, and I see this point has already been raised in the Q&A. It means perhaps that the review misses out on the potential to harness supply chain initiatives to achieve some of the environmental and sustainability goals for the sector, the potential for sustainability labelling, the potential impacts of the necessary diet and protein transition, and possible trade-offs if healthy and sustainable diets turn out to be more expensive. I would also have welcomed further discussion around the interpretation of sustainable productivity growth. Sustainable productivity growth is defined in the review, Francesco has given it just now, as an increase in output achieved through the use of fewer inputs and accelerated total factor productivity growth. This definition gives little guidance for the at times heated debate within Europe between advocates of yield growth achieved through more efficient use of conventional inputs and the use of advanced technologies, and those advocating the adoption of more natural methods, such as organic, agroecological, or regenerative agriculture. It's difficult to measure progress towards sustainability if we cannot agree what a sustainable agriculture is. A final point on which we need to reflect is the political economy of what the OECD review recommends. It's perhaps understandable the OECD as an organization refrains from commenting on the level of financing it thinks might be justified to pursue the green transition in agriculture. By default, its recommendations imply a reallocation of existing resources among beneficiaries and member states, which is never an easy political exercise. Of course, we need to use existing resources more wisely, as this review points out. Simply calling for inflation-proofing the CAP budget, implying more money for doing the same thing, is not going to persuade anyone to increase the CAP budget. But if we look at the success stories of the green transition in Europe to date, the rapid rollout of wind and solar energy, the shift to electric vehicles in transport, the increasing take-up of heat pumps in residential buildings, all have been driven by very significant public subsidy. Now, farming is already a highly subsidized activity, but these subsidies mostly do not induce behavioral change. Reforming the CAP budget in the way suggested in this review would create the opening to argue for additional funds for the green transition in agriculture, both to de-risk the management changes we're asking farmers to make, as well as to greatly increase the budget for payments for ecosystem services. But it's not only the amount of money that's available that's important, it's also how it's spent. And here the review identifies the need to link member states' CAP budgetary allocations to the achievement of environmental and climate objectives. We need to reward member states that go for higher ambition, whether through competitive grants or performance bonus or some other mechanism. And I feel the review has done a service by opening this issue for wider debate. Thanks for this opportunity, Jesus, to comment on the report.
Thank you very much, Alan, for these really good insights. And let me pass the floor now to Gianluca Brunori.
First of all, thank you very much for inviting me to the very interesting workshop and to share with you some reflection on the very interesting report. Actually, I will concentrate on one of the key recommendations that I found in the report. I quote, bringing innovation to the center of the EU agricultural policy. I couldn't agree more on this because we are, as also Alan Matthews said, that we are in a times of transformation. So we need the transition, and innovation is the key to transformation. The fact is that transformation is something that will change practices, will change business models, and also will change system configuration. Already was the issue of the food system was mentioned. But this will imply also different knowledges, different infrastructures, and in some cases breaking consolidated, but also obsolete paradigms in some cases. So this means that the innovation can be not without adjectives. We need to address the issue of transformative innovation. So innovation that challenges old paradigms and propose new pathways. And I think that there are at least three implications for this. The first one is that all policy measures should be designed to be transformative, so to generate innovation. And I think that to a certain extent, incentives, regulations, conditionalities, etc., should be able to generate innovation. But then it is necessary to design specific innovation-focused activities. But in this case, as I will say in a moment, this innovation-focused activities should have a clear transformative role. And then, as also in the report is recommended, it is needed to allocate really an adequate proportion of resources to this goal. So I will just address the three aspects on the regard of innovation-focused initiatives. And the first one is directionality. So innovation should be linked to clear outcomes and impact, because we cannot accept the idea that innovation per se is good. And when we regard directionality, for example, I have in mind innovation that supports the continuation of monoculture, for example, or industrial agriculture, maybe reducing a little bit the impact in terms of inputs, etc., but not changing direction. So this is a question I pose also to you. Is this enough for supporting transformation? My personal view is that it doesn't. The second aspect is related to the knowledge and innovation systems. We know now that farmers innovate when they are in networks that provide resources and rules for their activities. So with a given system of knowledge and innovation, we have to consider that there will be an interaction between them. And so having the need of new knowledge and new approaches, we need to design new agriculture and knowledge system. And the third aspect linked to the previous two is related to data. Data are really a huge opportunity for this, but they should be considered in terms of the capacity to really provide farmers with managing complex ecosystems. So not to simplify, but also to be able to manage complex ecosystems. And at the same time, we should think in terms of data revolutioning also the structure and the services that agriculture, knowledge, and innovation systems will provide. In order to do this, we have to think in terms of motivation of the actors to share their data. So also incentives to a certain extent, but addressing specifically regulatory and governance barriers to interoperability of software, hardware, and data. Thank you very much for this.
Thank you, Gianluca, for these very interesting insights. Let me give Francesco the opportunity to have a brief reaction to this set of questions, and then we will go to a few questions from the Q&A. Francesco.
Okay, yes, thank you both to Alan and Gianluca, because I think I'm trying to be concise, but this allow me to maybe to reply some of the questions that are being raised in the Q&A session, because I think some of them are in line with your comments and questions. I will start with Alan first on the food system issues. It is true that the review, as the CAP, mainly focused on the farm sector and farm-related policies. But to some extent, I think we cover some food system-related issues, not food policies. But the review, I think, first of all, frame the discussion within the triple challenge facing food system, food security, nutrition, and livelihoods for actors in the food chain, and improving environmental sustainabilities, and to focus on how the policies can increasingly deliver on broad food system objectives, showing, for example, the trade-offs between productivity and sustainability. And this is how to go behind the traditional income support and to incentivize innovations. So the review makes clear that in some cases, additional goals cannot be achieved without a strategic orientation of policies. We need to improve skills, change in mindsets, and to search innovative solutions. I know we could have gone a little bit much further, but to some extent, we were also in the context last year where there was an ongoing discussion at the EU level on the legislative framework of sustainability food systems. I didn't want to interfere too much on that. I mean, we wanted to go to an because we are assessing, as we said at the beginning, the past policies and what is going on in the present, in the future. We don't have evidence on that, so we prefer to keep that a little bit far from this. I mean, from on the background. But to some extent, I saw the issue of trade-offs really cover important food systems approach. Sustainable productivity growth. I would like to nuance maybe a bit the message from Alan's, because I think the OECD has a quite elaborate thinking on sustainable productivity, and to some extent is also reflected in the review, because we say, okay, producing more with less inputs, but it includes also good performance using OECD agri-environmental indicators, and we start from an output-based approach to see what the indicators say. And so it's up to the countries to decide whether to use the different models of agriculture, we think. I mean, we know that organic farming, agroecology, regenerative agriculture are all good examples, and we start from the output to see to what extent these examples are successful to achieve the objective of the policy, to resource efficiency, improving resource efficiency, a better use of natural capital, and so on. And the OECD is also already working on a measurement of the specific environmental sustainable productivity index to put together, again, a little bit better the issue of productivity sustainability in a common and shared indicator. Final point that you made, Alan, was in the political economy of the OECD. Yes, we didn't enter too much into the budget issues, but I think we also make clear that the budgetary mechanism of the CAP doesn't help. It's really based on pre-allocated CAP amounts between member states, and we also think about, we believe this is the moment to think about to link better the budget to the performance of member states. So we open that discussion without specific issues, but focusing more on performance would benefit from stronger responsibility from member states, performance bonus, other incentives, different co-financing rates. We don't have specifics of this, but we think it's the time to open this discussion as well, to link better and to provide the right incentive to member states to deliver. That was in brief what my reactions to Alan. Then Gianluca, you covered a bit more the issue of innovations, which are one of the core aspects covered here. And thank you very much, because I think you complement very well my initial points during the presentation, and you added some food for thought on few issues. The first of all was on directionality. Again, we agree, and we think a clear strategic decision to put innovation at the center of food system is necessary to address agriculture's triple challenge. And the issue of sustainable productivity growth could be the direction of that. So increasing the investment in innovation and the incentives that induce environmental sustainability together with productivity growth is crucial to ensure this food system transformation. And how to create this directionality of agricultural policy is something that need to be discussed in more details. And we feel that the review included interesting suggestions that could be a starting point for this discussion. Maybe are not comprehensive, but I think we try to cover all the different aspects, including going to the second point, the redesign of the ACIs, which is really important to achieve these objectives of directionality. So we have several recommendations on that, and in terms of coordination, maybe one important here that was not stressed enough is the need to upgrade farmer skills in relation to the environmental sustainabilities and digital technologies. We feel that this is really essential to meet the European Green Deal objectives, to make sure that the farmers are the knowledge and the skills to do how to change their practices. And we suggest the European Commission to identify first of all the skill gaps in the upcoming years, take into account the new environmental agenda, and to explore possible action tracks to improve the skills. Digital technology play an important role here, but also data. As you said, and going to your last point, data sharing, interoperability, conditions for access to funding. And I think even here, we do have quite strong recommendations in terms of how to fill the data gaps. Not only for farmers to have the more reliable information on their side, but also for policymakers. So we suggest, for example, to use the CAP budget to support investment in data and to use the use of digital technology and to expand the data strategy to identify priority, especially for the environmental performance at farm and landscape level, which is really important there are important objectives and important gaps to fill if we really want to respond to the new Green Deal ambitions. Hope I address all your points, and let's see whether you
did indeed, Francesco, and I think you have tackled a lot of the questions that have already come through the Q&A. But let me now pass the floor to Adriana Garcia Vargas, that will bring at least a couple of these questions, grouping them. Adriana.
Yes, thank you, Jesus. Yes, well, indeed, Francesco, you addressed some of the issues already. So, and we are also a little bit running out of time. So I think we try to focus on a short, concise one. This one is, everybody likes talking about innovation. What do you define under innovation concretely? Could you give some examples?
Yes, I mean, in terms of the example, I think in the review, we bring a lot of examples, and we try to have a really broader definition of innovation, not in terms of farming practices, in terms of adoption of new technologies, because we think also tools like precision farming, digital technologies may help farms to achieve environmental objectives. But innovation also more from an institutional social perspective, where we try to put all the stakeholders together, and as we said before, maybe I think by Gianluca, create a networks where farmers really can share their knowledge and create all the conditions that to enhance peer-to-peer learning, for example, or to make sure that advisors have the right skill and knowledge to boost the innovation in the direction of environmental sustainability. At this regard, I think the EU landscape is so complex and heterogeneous that it's difficult to provide an example that fit for all the context. And the European Union, we think, is doing a good job in terms of process, try to create platform of exchange that are going in this direction. What is really maybe we think is missing is an evaluation of this process. Are these innovations really producing results on the fields? Are really the farmers benefiting from this new approach based on interactions? I'm thinking specifically on operational groups, for example. So what we suggest, for example, is to make a full assessment of to what extent this approach has really achieved a result, and which are the models that can be replicable in different contexts. We know that the European Union is already working on that direction, but we feel that there is some gaps to be filled to be sure that the farmers are enabled, all the farmers, not just the ones that are participating in some operational groups, have the right knowledge and skill upgrade to reach the environmental objectives.
Thank you, Francesco. Maybe one more, just very, very quick, short one. This one is more on the environmental sustainability part. How could the EU create incentives for member states so the CAP contributes to Green Deal objectives?
This is very linked to the last point raised by Alan. I think we don't provide specific objectives, but we really feel that this, in terms of political economy, this is the issue. We need to check whether the current CAP, the 2023-2027, is really using the push of this new delivery model, as I said on my slide, whether there is already in place some incentives or not. I mean, in our view, it looks like this hasn't changed too much. And we need to find a way to make understand that the new European Green Deal objective, a new performance-based approach on agricultural policies, need to create also the right incentive to member states. And this is really the issues. Breaking the path dependency of the CAP is really challenging, and it's not possible to do that in 1 year. But at least we think to start to think in a way to this transition is a good way forward, starting by investing in data and evaluation right now, and to find the right policy leverage for the future, to create a more integrated policy packages where the member states really have the incentives to move forward to a bolder agricultural policy, which needs to deliver to new objectives and not keep attached to the path dependency of the past.
Thank you very much, indeed, Francesco and Adriana, and all the participants for your questions. Before we close, we're arriving to the closing of this webinar. Let me give the opportunity to Catherine if she wants to just react to some of the recommendations that have been discussed and or on the way forward that she thinks in terms of using it for the policy making in the European Union. Catherine?
Yes, thank you very much. I think I can be short because I've already mentioned how we are going to use that. For sure, it's going to feed into our work when preparing the future CAP. As I said, everything that is being mentioned in relation, though of course you were reviewing the previous CAP, your recommendation will be useful in terms of looking at how we can be more effective, how we can bring also and in particular when it comes to targeting support, making sure also that we are driving also we are driving, we are supporting farmers in a better manner when it comes to protecting our natural resources and climate. And that's going to be very important. I concur also on an important point, which is we need to make sure that our farmers remains fully skilled, and here we are talking about, making sure that transfer knowledge, advice is more effective. That's probably something on which we will need to further work, because I'm not saying they are unskilled, our farmers, but you need to make sure that they have access to the latest, information. This is about changing. And the comment that was made also in terms of social innovation is important. In particular, Something on which we are reflecting is linked to the fact that we might need not just to have result-based support, but also to have more collective project approach, where different, of course, we are talking here about farmers, but farmers in isolation will not be able to deliver sustainable food systems. They need to work closely with their customers, so the downstream value chain, as well as the input industry. Voilà.
Thank you very much, Catherine, for these ending closing words. Let me just finalize, saying that I think the report provides us, and the discussion today provides how the OECD is in a good position to support this dialogue that was announced by the Commission President just a couple of months ago, providing important evidence-based analysis and benchmarking. I think that's the main comparative advantage of the OECD, and which is included, perfectly included in the proposals of that are in this review, that will allow will help for sure to strategically orientate the CAP in the directions that we have been mentioning here, with these challenges of incorporating environmental and other aspects of sustainability to the objectives, and also broadening the scope of the discussion in the EU to consider different options that come also from other OECD countries. So let me just, to finalize, thank you first the two speakers, Catherine and Francesco, and the two experts, Alan and Gianluca, for the very insightful and interesting interventions. Let me give a big thanks to the OECD team and the colleagues in the Commission that have contributed to the preparation of the review, but also those who have contributed to prepare this webinar now. Thank you for all participants. There has been a very large attendance of more than 200 online during this webinar, and your active involvement. Please keep tuned, because as we have been discussing, this review will be using in the coming months while the post-2027 CAP debate is underway, in order to have more opportunities to discuss these key findings and having discussions with other stakeholders and participants. Thank you very much, everybody, and have a very good day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.